Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this latest episode of Between the Pages with the Sound on Stage, where we shine a light and focus on playwrights, authors, and anyone else who puts pen to paper, either literally or figuratively, to create the art that we enjoy so much. I'm your host, Greg Heilman, and I'm joined today by award-winning playwright and returning guest, Keiko Green. Keiko was a prolific writer for both stage and screen and was the winner of our Sound on Stage Award last year for her superb work with The Bed Trick as the original production. That show is being produced this month by Artist Repertory Theatre in Portland, and I definitely want to talk about all of the irons Keiko has in the fire. But first, I want to talk about her play Exotic Deadly, or the MSG play, which is being co-produced here in Seattle by Pork-Filled Productions and Sis Productions, and is running on stage at the Theater off Jackson from September 6th through the 20th. Welcome back to the show, Keiko.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, before we get to the actual play, I want to talk about titles. This title is intriguing, as are all of you. You
Yeah.
are mentioned for coming up with some pretty creative titles, like you're cordially invited to the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Just to name another one, but can you talk to me a little bit about the evolution of a title? Do you start with a title and then develop a play? Does the title sort of morph over time?
Yeah, I think it depends on the show for sure. Some pieces really, I think for this one, I knew I wanted to write something about MSG. I didn't know the title when I started writing it. And then I think in some kind of procrastination rabbit hole, I saw, at some point that I can't even remember what decade it was and what paper or article it was, but they were describing MSG in like in some headline it said exotic deadly, and it reminded me of all of the times as an Asian American woman, as an actress, I was like sexualized and I was always put in like dominatrixy roles, or like wearing leather a lot, and it kind of reminded me of just the, I don't know, like my experience as a Asian American woman. And one of the characters in the play, I won't even say spoiler alert, because it is kind of a spoiler, but it's like so ingrained as part of the play, and you'll know exactly. It's like one of the characters actually embodies MSG, and I think her experience, she is called Exotic Deadly, and her experience really mimics both things. She is both MSG, and she also, is kind of figuring out who she is in this world of being objectified. Yeah, and I think that the most important thing for me with titles is, one, it should relate to the content of the show somewhat, but also I think even more importantly is it should give us a sense of the tone of the play before people even come in. So we have two plays coming up, I have two plays opening up in Seattle this week, and one of them is Exotic Deadly with Pork-Filled and Sis, and the other is Hell's Canyon with Washington Ensemble Theatre. That one really gives a sense of like, I think you can just tell that it's going to be a horror even before even read a blurb. So I think that that's the most successful title, is like, if it's a fun comedic play, it shouldn't have words like that feel like trauma, or that
Yeah.
feel really dramatic. And that's kind of the main thing. But yeah, titling plays is hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, it's well, you do have a penchant for some good titles, some memorable ones. So definitely appreciate that. So on the story itself, so this is two worlds colliding. You have one individual, this kind of angsty teenager who discovers that their family is the, I guess, inventors or manufacturers of MSG, and then you've got this other character who comes in, Exotic Deadly, a new arrival from Japan. But there's time travel. There's, obviously teenage angsty stuff. There's female
Yeah.
empowerment. You've got a ton of stuff going on here, all wrapped up in this what sounds like a hilarious comedy. So how do you? I guess first of all, how do you balance these issues? So you tackle some serious things, but you do it with a lot of humor. You did the same thing in The Bed Trick. Uh, how do you balance those? And do you start with one and add the other? Uh, it-
Yeah, I find that people are more likely to give me the benefit of the doubt, or they're more likely to let themselves fall into a darker theme or some deeper thoughts if I am showing them that I have their best interests at heart and I'm guiding them. Like I have a good hold over this play as a creator. And so, one of the ways that I like to do that is through comedy. I think that every time I mean, listen, the bed trick, when I first was writing the bed trick, I thought it was going to be a drama. And I kept writing it, and the first time we read it out loud, I was like, oh, this is funny. And I think that happens a lot. Exotic Deadly is different because I wrote it. It was my first play I was writing during when the pandemic hit, and we thought COVID was basically like might have killed theater. And so there was a part of me that was writing this play kind of assuming that it would never get produced. And so I wasn't really worrying too much about whether things made, there exactly, it goes into time travel and there, we have Ben and Matt, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon as characters, and then we see the same people called Ben and Matt now as teenage boys out of high school, and we're just kind of accepting it. There's this kind of like child logic is what I like to call it. There's a TV show I love called I Think You Should Leave that Tim Robinson created, that my husband and I always talk about child logic. It's like full of child logic. And I think Exotic Deadly is 100% that. It's just like, we're not overthinking. We're just going to keep diving right in. And the play moves like a little bit too fast for people to be being like, excuse me, actually, you just have to keep going with it. And because it's from the point of view of a 14-year-old girl. And I think that's where like the two plays are really different. Hell's Canyon and Exotic Deadly. Exotic Deadly is definitely from the POV of a 14-year-old girl. And so she is an unreliable narrator. She is her mind goes a mile a minute, and she is really led by hormones. While Hell's Canyon, we are watching a group of people, and we are a third party kind of watching in kind of in a more traditional theater way, even though there are lots in there that are also kind of unique, I'd say.
Well, it's not just suspending your disbelief; it's sort of checking it at the door, and so yeah, when you go to see Exotic Deadly. Now, I don't have the details on Hell's Canyon. You said the Washington Ensemble Theatre. Do you have any of the details handy on that one? And I can post these.
Oh yeah, it's opening. Yes. So Hell's Canyon opens Friday, September 5th, from Washington Ensemble Theatre at 12th Avenue Arts. And then Exotic Deadly opens the very next day at Theater Off Jackson, with Parkfield Productions and Sis Productions. And the two theater companies are actually, or both productions are kind of they're working together. So if you get a ticket for one of the shows, you can get a discount for the other show. And there are just certain days, I think people have told me that they bought tickets for both shows and they're marathoning it like on a Sunday or something. So there's a lot of fun. They're very different plays. Hell's Canyon is a real horror. It is definitely should be scary. And Exotic Deadly is very much like bring your grandma, bring your grandkids. Fun for the whole family. Yeah.
So I assume you're attending both premieres?
I sure am. I'm very excited.
So how do you juggle that? Because you've got not just these two shows this week. You've got, if I look at the list here, you've got 7 plays currently in various stages of performance, at least counting from what I saw on the website, maybe even more, including 3 world premieres. You're Cordially Invited. The End of the World is coming to Oregon Shakespeare next season. And you're working on a production for A24 and Apple called Margot's Got Money Trouble. So first of all, I mean, do you have any free time?
Yeah, it depends on the month. And, this is a really busy month because I've gotten all these new commissions. So I'm also trying to finish up some old commissions, start new plays. I'm really, I'm also really lucky where I'm getting to focus on my writing as full time, which is something that I only dreamed of back in the day. And so, in the midst of all this, like, yes, we're also next week. I'm opening up a physical world premiere of a production of WAD, which we had a virtual production of at ACT during COVID, but this will be the first time we're doing it with actors on stage and with a real audience in front of them. And so we're treating that definitely like it's the first production. And so I'm here, I was flown into for a residency up at Hedgebrook by Seattle Rep because I'm writing something for them. And while I was there, I wrote 50 pages of a new play for them and then revised this play for the Bruce Lee thing that's going to be going up at Seattle Children's in the spring. Then coming here, have a couple days to work on some other projects, going to these two openings, and then on Sunday morning I fly out back to Indianapolis so we can open up WAD. So it is, but that's not normal. Like I don't think my weeks are usually like that. I think I'm, this happens to be a bit of a crazy time, but a lot of my time, the time my work looks lazy because I'm just moving from room to room, finding comfortable places to sit with my laptop, getting kind of stuck and looking for a snack, and it looks lazy. I'm not always like such a jet setter, which it kind of feels like right now. But but I do have a lot of projects going on, and luckily I enjoy juggling multiple things. So I'm, even when we're not, even this week it's been, I'm excited to go to these openings, and I've been working, on revisions for the bed trick in Portland and the revisions on WAD, and making sure I'm reading those rehearsal reports. And I'm also on casting meetings for OSF and meeting the producers and checking out the set design and making sure there's nothing that or is any big red flags. And then meanwhile, making sure our workshop for Bruce Lee is going well. So it's been, it can be overwhelming, I think, but I think I have the right brain for it.
Yeah. Well, we're happy you're able to take some time then after your Indianapolis trip to come back and be a presenter at our awards ceremony on the 15th for the Best Original Production Award, which you won last year.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, so we're excited to have you. But so I guess that you partly answered one of my other questions was how involved do you stay in your work after you premiere it? It sounds like that you kind of at least peripherally, but sometimes even more so, stay involved in future productions of your work.
Yeah, it really depends on the project. You know, a lot of times playwrights like to stay involved until it's published, and Exotic Dudley, Cordially Invited, and this play Empty Ride, they're all going to get published. So we signed the contract, so they'll be published very soon. So those ones are Exotic Dudley and Cordially Invited are in pretty good shape, except that, but there's something about like just making sure that the first few productions are like are as you intended, or if they're changing, it's for the better in a way that you agree with, and that they're not just getting pulled away from you. And a lot of times theaters ask me like this, the Bed Trick obviously premiered at Seattle Shakespeare. Was it last year? Was it only last year? Maybe. Oh my gosh.
That it was
Wow.
last season, so it would have been, was it spring?
Oh my gosh, last spring. That is wild to me. Wow, time flies. But when ART down in Portland asked to do the play, the AD who's directing it Luann really wanted to talk to me about a lot of stuff, and I'm really trying to make myself available for productions. So I had meetings with with the team at Exotic Deadly with Mimi. I had meetings with Amber over at Hell's Canyon. They even made sure that I was like checking out their cast to see if, and to make sure that it felt right. And so but I have a lot of meetings with them just to kind of talk to them about just to make space for if they have questions, but also to let them know, hey, these are things that we've tried before that were successful and things that were not successful. And I think that, one thing that I wish that theaters did more was kind of talk to each other about how their processes went. And I really do think that we can learn from each other. But other than that, it's like up to a theater. If a theater wants to fly me out and have me around, the Bed Trick, it meant, she was just like, I'm going to find the money to bring you in because we'd love to have you here in Portland for a week to just, be able to, answer questions and see if there are any little changes you want to make. They just really want it to be more collaborative. So it's really kind of up to the theater.
Okay. And you mentioned before about having the right kind of brain for this work. Does that include the ability to juggle all of these different stories and characters and things all at the same time, switching back and forth between a horror and a comedy or whatever another play might be?
Yes, I think so. Because I don't. I was just at Hedgebrook in Whidbey Island with all these other playwrights, and we had quite an interesting conversation because most we don't always get to talk to each other about our processes. And it was interesting to hear that most playwrights do kind of need to work on one play at a time. We had 5 days there, and I think that most people were like, I have my one project that I'm working on. I don't like to work like that. Like I have major ADHD, which you'll see is also reflected in Exotic Deadly. I think it's like so clearly an ADHD story. but 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 I also, I block in my time. If I have a deadline coming up, like I have a slightly corporate a script that I have to send in for something that's due tomorrow. Today and tomorrow, I'm just working on that. I'm just trying to get those things out. But otherwise, I like to, schedule in my calendar in blocks. So maybe I'll have 3 days I'm working on this. Maybe it's if I'm feeling like this thing exhausts me to work on. So I'll only block in 4 hours of this, and then I'll work on my film for 3 hours or something. That way I can, I don't know. I don't start to feel like it's a burden to go to a project. I think that's what I'm always trying to avoid, is that I want to sit in front of my laptop and be like, oh, a new sparkly thing. I'm excited to work on this, rather than feeling like exhausted just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think like that does help, especially it depends on the play, because Exotic Deadly is one where we're like really with this one character the whole time. Ami basically doesn't leave the stage, and she's the lead of the show. We open with a monologue with her, and it's her story. So something like Hell's Canyon is like, we are seeing the setup of this play was that there's three this group of 5 people are at a cabin in the woods, and it's an Airbnb, and there's a living room, a kids room, and a master bedroom, and we should be able to see all spaces at one time, which means that sometimes the script is split up where like sometimes there's 3 columns on a page where we're seeing what's happening in the living room, and then there's 2 conversations happening in the 2 other rooms. And that kind of thing, I think, the way my brain works, it is really helpful, because I think for some people it might be really hard to imagine 3 different things happening at the same time and how those things can like interweave. But for me, I think I just have like actually a quite like mathematical brain, and so there's something about that just feels like puzzle pieces coming together that I find really satisfying.
But is there a bit of context switch or different sort of context switching when it comes to going between playwriting and screenwriting?
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm working on 2 feature films right now. One is with they're in totally different places. One is kind of a spec script that I'm just working on my own, and one is in development with a production company that focuses on thriller horrors, and they wanted me to develop one of my plays, Sharon, into a feature film. And so, Sharon exists as a play, which you would think makes it easy to adapt, but instead you really have to throw out the entire script and only think of like the initial concept of what they liked, because it can't happen. It just doesn't work like that. Which actually makes it a little bit harder. But what I love about writing for, film, I'm still kind of learning the ropes. I think what's interesting about TV is, it's so fast. I get, we it feels like it sounds like we're, probably like it's a long process, and in a way it is, but for Interior Chinatown, for example, it was like 10 episodes that we wrote over 20 weeks. And each person is given, though the first episode was the pilot had already been written, but it's getting rewritten and rewritten during those 20 weeks too. And each person is assigned an episode. A couple people write more than one, and it's just really fast. And suddenly this group that was like 11 people big, this writer's room, suddenly most of the people are off in meetings or writing outlines or writing scripts. And so now there's only three of us. And now we're like on a episode late in the season, and suddenly like we're rushing to figure out like what we're trying to do the work of 11 people. And then you have 2 weeks to turn these like index cards into a 25-page outline, which is basically an entire TV script without the dialogue. And there's just something about the TV world that I think has trained me to write fast and just let's just try it out. Like we can always change it, but let's just try a version. That way we have something to look at and kind of criticize. And I think what's been really nice in terms of how that's translated into my playwriting is one, I'm not just collaborative because it's like kumbaya, I'm not really like a very woo-woo person. I'm actually collaborative in a way because it's also really beneficial to me. Like if I have to do all of this work on my own, it's one, it's harder, and also there's only one point of view to kind of poke holes. If I start collaborating, bringing directors in, asking what they think, bringing in actors, having them tell me what their feedback is, reading this draft out loud, then suddenly I'm getting like so many more voices to help me. So if anything, it almost feels like a really selfish way of working, I think that it's also more fun for everybody too.
Yeah, for sure. But there's also, I imagine, a sort of we talk about checking disbelief at the door, but checking your pride at the door in a way, because if you're open yourself to other voices, it makes your work better, but it's also being open to that.
Yes, I know. It's interesting because I work with, in TV, you can be a really famous playwright, not me, like there are other people that are like very famous playwrights that are in these TV rooms, and then they pitch something and everyone's like, that doesn't make any sense. Next, and it's just like you have to get used to that. And it's really refreshing in a way. And I love that because I'm like, oh my God, it's my name that's going to be on my episode. And I'm getting like free help from these experts who can make my episode even better. And so I have zero pride when it comes to that. And similarly with theater, I think that there are sometimes I find it difficult to work in note sessions because everyone's a little too sensitive. So, an AD will, they're trying to give notes, but they don't want to like give anything prescriptive. So they'll be like, yes. And there are certain moments that maybe you should look at where I feel like this one character is maybe disappearing in her perspective. And you can tell that they're talking about a specific moment and they're not telling you what it is. And I'm just like, can you just tell me what the moment is? Like, I don't want to fix. Yeah. I just don't want to start going through this whole thing and waste a bunch of time fixing things that aren't the problem. If it's really just one line, because if it's one line, then I can be like, oh, can I tell you why it's there? And then we can talk about it and they'll be like, oh my God. Oh, I was just misinterpreting that. If that's the thing then you might actually want to change something else because I thought you were trying to say this. And so there's a lot of like miscommunication that can happen when people are being really vague and sensitive with each other. So I prefer I like to ask a lot of questions back, which I think I don't know, it clears a lot of that up.
Well, last question I want to get to is and you bring up, you introduced the horror thing with Hell's Canyon. What I found is people that live in the Pacific Northwest or from the Pacific Northwest have a unique ability to capture horror and suspense in a way, which I think, which I'll be interested to see how you spin that, because I've only ever seen comedies from you, which I guess my question was going to be, have you always been funny?
I like to think so. I was I was like 5'7" in fifth grade. So I always felt like a monster growing up. And I grew up in like a super white area in Georgia. So I think I always And I grew up with two older brothers, very much a tomboy. I was on the basketball team. And so I just felt like kind of a monster growing up. And so I think that, like many funny people, I grew up as like, oh, that's how I'll, be self-deprecating, make the joke about yourself before anyone else can. And also comedy was just kind of a way that I thought that I could like get people to like me probably. It's so like depressing, but that's where like comedians come from, I think. And so yes, I think it's always been a part of me. I've always wanted to, if I could make my brothers laugh, then I was like, I felt I was on a high for weeks, I think that the horror, I love horror, I love thrillers. And I think the reason I like those things, one is because my husband makes me watch horrors relentlessly. Like if he had his way, we would watch a horror movie every single night. Um, but I think, but I do also love them too. And I think that what I love so much about them is that there is something that's same mathematically to comedy. It's still building tension, real people in real situations. Either what's happening to them is funny, and you're like, oh, there's a lot of tension here. How are they going to get out of this? And that's funny. Or it's like, oh my God, how are they going to get out of this because it's scary? I don't like, but and then there's a release. There's either the release of laughter because it finally leads to some kind of like explosion, or it leads to a release in like a really scary moment, a jump scare, or someone is finally able to follow through with something that's violent or whatever it is. But the idea of tension and release is exactly the same, which is I think why there are so many great comedians who've turned to horror, like Jordan Peele. And the person oh my gosh, I can't remember their name, but the person that made Weapons. Like you watch Weapons and you can tell there's some moments that I'm like, I can't believe I'm laughing near the end of this movie, but it's genuinely very funny, And
Even
so
John
I do think that
Krasinski
there's
was
a
on
lot
it.
of
Yeah.
similarities. Say that again?
Even John Krasinski with his
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of overlap in those worlds, I think, and so it's something that I've always been really kind of fascinated by, and I love dread more than I love I like a slaughter film. I'm not really into those kinds of things, but I do love watching. I guess my biggest question in Hell's Canyon is um I was an Asian American it's about a Chinese American woman who's 7 months pregnant. She's acting as a surrogate for two of her friends who's this white couple, and her and so Ariel and her brother and this couple and Ariel's ex are all in this cabin in the woods. So all this interrelationship stress, and there's so much conflict between everybody, and it's so stressful. And it's also really funny. I think the first two-thirds of the play are just genuinely very funny, with moments of worry, but there's just something really cool about what I wanted to write about a specific massacre, like a haunting based on a specific massacre in a way that I had never seen before. I wanted to write a play where I could see multiple relationships unfolding at the same time, in private spaces on stage. And also, I was really interested in, I was a person in my 20s that just had so much rage in me. I was so mad about my opportunities. I just felt so like I just couldn't spread out into the world. And there was a lot of microaggressions, especially back then, that I think, I do think that times are changing in that way. Even the fact that like they're doing this play told me that. But there is a lot of stuff that's unfortunately very relatable still about that building of microaggressions eventually. And there's a question of like, what is your breaking point? And, a big question of also like, what did it take to become the monster that you are trying really hard not to be? And so, yeah, and in that somehow we also find humor. Yeah.
Well, we are human, so I think our human experience is all very funny when you
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that there, with horror in theater, often people do like really campy stuff. Like it's all about camp, and I just think camp I mean, no offense to people that write that. I've seen some things that have been like really fun, but to me, it always feels a little bit like a cop out. Like you're refusing to actually lean into the thing that you want to do because you're afraid. And
Yeah.
so I think writing a real horror is about leaning into what you're afraid of.
Awesome. Well, Hell's Canyon opens, it's presented by Washington Ensemble Theatre, opens at 12th Avenue Arts on Friday, the 5th. I think the 5th, right?
Mhm.
And, Exotic Deadly, the MSG play, opens at Theater Off Jackson, co-production from Porkville Productions and Sis Productions, on Saturday the 6th. So, Keiko Green, thank you so much for taking time to talk about those. I could have probably talked to you ad nauseum about all of your projects, but we have to leave it at that for now. So, uh,
Thank you so much. You know, I like to chatter.
awesome. We'll have to do it again sometime, and I can't wait to see you at our awards on Monday the 15th, after your trip to Indianapolis for your other your premiere. So, I appreciate the time out of your busy schedule you took to talk to me about these plays.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll see you soon.
Okay, and for everybody out there, Greg Heilman with the Sound on Stage. Thank you for watching this episode of Between the Pages with the Sound on Stage. And until next time, I will see you all at the stage door.